Cool. Nice to see some familiar faces on the or names on the chat or the participant list as well. Before we get going to Joe, you want to introduce yourself? Joe Kremer.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Kremer. Billy and I are the assistant coaches at Stanford Beach. And a little bit about me. I played beach in college at USC, graduated 2018. Lucky enough to be with the team when we won 3 national championships there. So that was a really awesome experience. This is now my second year coaching at Stanford. And before this, I coached 1 year at Tulane with the beach program and a lot of different club, high school, beach, indoor, private lessons, everything under the sun before that.
I'm Billy Allen. This is the start of my second year here at Stanford. I also coached a lot of club, both on the beach side and the indoor side. One quick season at Cal Indoor, and I played beach volleyball on the AVP and internationally for the last 20 years. And I co-host a coaching podcast with another coach who I won't mention.
So it's good to see what people are coaching, and I think what we're going to go through is really relevant to not just any kind of volleyball, beach or indoor, but also really any sport that you can think of. So we're going to be try to be like as non-beachy as possible, and really just talk about how to develop a plan to help athletes in any sport get a little bit better. So let's get into it. I want to talk about why this is important and where it came from. So if you want to get in the weeds, you can look up self-determination theory, but really autonomy supportive environment. That's something that's really important to us as a program. You can read the 3 bullet points there: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. If we're hitting all those marks, we feel like our players are going to get better. They're going to have a fulfilling experience, and probably be pretty healthy through it all. So also in the chat, if you scroll all the way to the top, I shared links for our player development plan example and a statistics pivot table and Google Sheet that you guys can look at and just duplicate if you want to take it. I would click on the PDP example first. And if you can't see that, let me know. Oh, thanks for resending it out. So that's a good thing to follow along with. Let's get into it. So this is the structure. And basically, at the end of the day, we want to have a physical document that we are continually reevaluating, adding to, and then that the athletes can go through and chip away at practice and in competition as well. So the player development plan is a living document where we have all these different inputs, right? We have from the coaches, from the players, we have from strength coach, teammates, and then from the data that we gather throughout their gameplay. And all of this is leading into the player development plan. And then we give it to them, we go through it with them, and then we are reviewing it and combing through it at practice so that people can get better. And then it's this continuing cycle. By the time they graduate from our program, their PDP is probably going to be like close to 30 pages long, just kind of charting their trajectory and growth over time. And so that's the overview of what we're doing. This is the timeline. A lot of pieces to this. So when we get back into the fall, and look, this is just the beach volleyball schedule for college. So if this doesn't match up with your seasons, it's okay. This is just a general template of like how a timeline and progression can go. Let's see, there's something in the little chat there. Okay, so we take a lot of statistics. I think stats are very dependent on like what your resources are. We are very fortunate at Stanford to have this wonderful staff. Billy and Joe are just combing through our matches and putting pen to paper to take stats, and that's how we're doing it. But if you're getting your stats from some other resource, whether it's Huddle or Volleymetrics or something else, it can be as basic or as deep as you want. But having that in there is a great way to track progress over time. And then players are filling out some forms, coaching staff filling out some forms, teammates filling out forms, and then we put them all together. And then we're going to go through all this, and we'll probably cycle back to this as well. And then players are filling out journal cards before each practice. And then we kind of do it all over again. So it's really this continually evolving document that each player can go through. Now, I want to just hop out of here real quick, and you guys can see for the coaching staff going into Google Documents, Google Docs, and having different tabs for each player on your team. I don't have stats for Beyonce or Paul McCartney or whoever, but here's Taylor's, and this is what it looks like. And so then you can just go through and you can have as many people as you want on here. Again, this is all free. You don't have to pay for any of this, which we love. And then you're clicking around and adding stuff. And we'll get into each section, but this is what it looks like. Scroll through, we give them a printed copy, try and make it engaging. And then they're going to have this document with them at every practice. All right, so let's get back into this. That's the timeline. These are some of the stats that we're pulling from. We probably won't get too in the weeds with how we're tracking stats, but the nice thing is, like, what I want people to take away from this is that we're adding all of this information. These are the things that Billy and Joe are combing through, adding it in there. We're not going to talk about all this. It's probably different for every program in terms of how they want to do this. If you want to look at it on your own, go for it, and you can duplicate it and rip it off. But we're taking all the stats that we do and putting them in. Billy and Joe, do you guys want to add to kind of like that process for you?
Yeah, I will start off by saying that I do think taking some level of stats is very important to kind of check yourself as a coach and check your own biases, because it's impossible not to have biases as a human being, and we try as hard as we can to treat all our players equally, of course. But stats just can confirm that you're correct in what you're thinking, shed light on something that you hadn't noticed in practice. So I think it's really important to keep us honest. It doesn't have to be as in-depth as the way we do it. We're really lucky to have a full staff, so we have time to do this, and our stats are beach specific. So I wouldn't, copy that exact table if you're an indoor coach, but I do think thinking about what kind of stats you can take, even if it's just a very, very basic side out percentage in different rotations for your indoor team, something easy. Again, it's also important to understand that stats tell a part of the story, not the whole story. So we kind of have a ranking of side out percentages, ace percentages, all those categories on our team. We know that it doesn't mean that the top side out player on the team is the best player on the team. It means that at the level of competition they're playing at, they have the best side out numbers. So stats don't just tell you what your lineup should be and make everything really easy, but it does shed light on a lot of information that, one, checks your biases, two, lets you know what you guys need to be working on in practice, three, can help you design new drills to focus on specific skills that you see are lacking across the team, etc. But we literally just take stats on paper. Like, I have one of my stat sheets right here. I write it as I watch video, and then I type it into this huge, scary looking picture that's on the screen right now. I promise it's not as scary as it looks. But yeah, that's really all from me. I don't think it's necessary to go through everything because it seems like most of you guys are indoor coaches anyways. But I'm definitely happy to talk more about the statistics process with anyone. If you want to look me up, my email is on gostanford.com, and feel free to reach out to me. I can't promise I'll answer right away since we're about to enter season here, but I really love taking stats. I kind of get a little nerdy about it, so I'm happy to chat with anyone more about it individually.
Awesome. Let's keep going. Billy, you can chip in in a moment. All right, so then we have player development surveys. So this is just a Google form that we created, and we send it out to our athletes. You can read through, we go through strengths to build on inside out, areas for growth inside out, and the same categories for defense. Talk about controllable factors, talk about non-playing contributions. Joe, you okay? Did I mess something up?
Oh, no, sorry. I'm reading the chat.
We love having teammate shout outs thrown in there. I think it's one thing to hear a teammate shout out in person at practice. It's another to have it in writing. I think that has a lot of value. And then during our fall, we don't have captains named or voted for. And so it's an opportunity to kind of shape the conversation around captaincy and leadership on the team, and get people thinking about like, well, what is important in a leader? And so we do this little leadership workshop. They're able to check 2 teammates' names for each category. And so one, it gets them thinking about what they're looking for in leaders, who are the people who are, really hitting the marks on those leadership qualities. And so it's shaping the conversation for voting for captains later on in the fall at the end of the segment. But it's also an opportunity. Let's say that someone in the last E category has like 5 teammates, really highlighting them. We put that into their PDP, and it's just a nice recognition of things that people are doing well, whether they're named a captain or not. In terms of the player development plan, this is the general breakdown of categories. Look, like anyone on here can add whatever inputs they want into this thing. It might be different for indoor, might be positional. For beach volleyball, it's a very like generalized sport. So people kind of need to be good at all the same things outside of blocking and defense. But these are the general categories. I feel a little strange. I feel like I'm just talking into like a black box here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. And then Jenny, maybe you can ask that.
I'll go ahead and do that right.
Coming up. Yeah, let's take a second. Kayla and Julio have some questions here. Do you film practice and take stats later, or are you doing it live during practice? We film and do it later. I don't think we would be effective at all taking stats during practice. Next question. When it comes to seeing part of the story versus the whole story as far as stats, is it more important to focus on winning points, losing points, or a fine line of both? Joe, Billy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think a fine line of both. Obviously, the ultimate goal in our sport is to score points. So focusing on who's scoring the most points in whatever way can be helpful. But I also think focusing on how they're scoring those points is going to be more helpful to your practice design, because then it lets you know who needs to work on what and will help inform how you design drills. But in terms of just deciding a lineup, yeah, I mean, if you focus on who's scoring the most points, hopefully they can do that in a game too. Billy.
Next question was, for those who don't have resources, what are the main ones you would focus on? I think in terms of the categories, the ones that are easy and free, right? So like having the player input is critical. Like I think that's one, it's so easy. You're sending out a Google form, they fill it out, they feel like they have a voice and some direction in all this. And then you're just copying and pasting this in there. And then when they have their self-evaluation and then you have a coach feedback evaluation, you see how aligned those are. And if they're totally different, there needs to be a conversation about where the misunderstandings are or lack of alignment is resting. And then other things that I think for people who don't have is like the most labor intensive thing that is in this PDP is all the statistical stuff, like far and away. Doing a coach assessment, write as much or as little as you want. Weight room insights, okay, maybe not everyone has that and you don't need to really at the juniors level. Non-cognitive skill goals, that's easy. You're just making like athletic goals in terms of professionalism and work ethic and how you want to be as a teammate. Things that are really more like life skills. Leadership workshop, teammate appreciation, easy. That's just coming from the team. So like the more that you involve your team and your athletes in this, they feel like they have a voice. It's not adding any work for you, and it's making it a much more collaborative document. Another question popping up. Do you find that the players are receptive early to these packets? Is there any drop off? Any tips for keeping them engaged? So we'll talk about the engagement right now. That's a great question. These are the other areas. We can go through this. You can also just go click on that document and read it at your own pace. We'll get back into the statistics, but in terms of like keeping the engagement going, we have this journal card. So when they get to practice, they have this folder, right? And we just have it color coded by like what year they are. So the players go in, they grab their folder before practice, they fill this out. And they can just write like one offensive goal if they want. They can pick a serving goal. Maybe it's directed by us and saying, hey, it's a really heavy offensive practice. Make sure that everyone chooses like an out of system offensive swing. Okay, for example. They go through, oh, look, we have Taylor Swift's here. Nice. So you can see what Taylor did throughout this week. They don't need to fill in every single category, but they're doing this before practice. And then at the end of practice, when we're doing our cool down stretch, they grab their folders and they just have a little bit of quiet reflection time. And our players are going through and like highlighting stuff or saying like, man, I crushed this. I was awesome. Or, oh, I was really struggling with this. I'm excited to get back into it next practice. The little gratitude piece is nice too. So in terms of how receptive they are, I think when you shine a light on someone's deficiencies, like in general, people aren't gonna like be really fired up at the onset. But if you give them like a pretty good roadmap and chip away at it with them, then they're gonna be fired up about it in the long run. So hopefully that answered your question. I'm gonna go back and then we can come back to some questions. So going back to statistics, Billy, you want to talk about benchmarks and how we deliver that?
Yeah. So I think just giving the players their numbers doesn't really tell them very much, right? And so we had these benchmarks to provide context. We have it divided up on our team, who is in the top third, middle third, bottom third of every category. And here are the numbers. I don't know if you guys can read that on your screen. And it lines up like directly below theirs. So they can say, Taylor here is overall side out percentage is 53%, if I read that right. So you can say, hey, I'm in the bottom third of that. And so and it's like color coordinated where the darker red, like the lower it is, the darker green, the higher it is. So this just provides context on where they are and numbers to shoot for. And like, hey, this is more important because I'm like in the bottom third. So I really need to focus on this versus this one I'm doing okay at right now. This one I'm like crushing it at. So keep it going, that kind of stuff. And I think this really helps me when it comes to filling out their PDPs. I can say, these are the areas where our strengths. This is awesome. Keep them up. These are the areas where we need to like upgrade. And then from there, like once I have these numbers, like Joe said, that's a little more objective than just kind of what just watching. Then I can say, hey, this is what I think are the causes of, your side out percentage being lower. And then maybe some suggestions that go along with focuses for that.
Piggybacking on that, I just want to skip ahead to something. So this is a really good feedback structure. Thanks to Matt from our business school for teaching us this. What, so what, now what? Okay, so let's say Billy's talking about Taylor's overall side out percentage. Okay, she's in the bottom third. So we go through this. Okay, Taylor, your side out percentage is in the bottom third of the team. Like you're just clear with it, really objective. So what? Why is this important? Well, side out is the vast majority of points scored, or maybe not vast majority, but the majority of points scored in beach volleyball are through side out. And it's important that, if you want to be at your best, we want to get that side out percentage up. Okay. Now what? And then we talk about actionable steps. Okay. It looks like you come in and you shoot high line 80% of the time. Okay. That's pretty easy to stop. Let's increase our range, where we're going. How do we do it? What do you think? What are some ideas that you have? So what, now what is a great delivery device for giving that feedback in a way that's clear, that's empathetic, and it gives some actionable items. Going back to the journal card, when we hand them this PDP, like this is a fictitious one. This is on the short side of things. So if you comb through this as an athlete, you're like, holy cow, what do I focus on at practice? And if you try and digest all of this at once, it's going to be really overwhelming. And that's where the journal cards are so important. They can just chase one rabbit at a time, not get too overwhelmed at training, and then slowly chip away at this thing over the course of a whole training block. In terms of the cadence of this, we're only delivering these at the end of our fall training block and after season. So there's a lot of information going into this. And this is also something that, like, we talked about how much time you have and the resources that you have in your program. Look, if you have a bunch of minions and you can pump these out like every 2 months, good on you. But I think that having it just twice a year is good enough, because you're doing the daily journaling to sift through it and chip away at everything in there. Let's go through a couple questions here. I have it pulled up. Entering tournament 3, when is it worth deciding a starter lineup when your club puts 12 on a team and there's a whole sharing court time mentality? Man, that's a big question. That's pretty loaded, Julio. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that one. But I mean, on a very surface level, I think that you got to think about what your goals are as a team, and those are going to be different depending on the level you're at. But having statistics and some sort of framework can help decide who's out there. How's that for a political answer?
I think that's a great answer. Good job. That's exactly. It's back it up, decide on your goals, exactly what we're talking about here, adapting it to the level and the level that your athlete can actually understand and process. So,
Yeah. Keep questions going in the chat. So key takeaways, like I said, this can be really overwhelming. And so having that daily journal is a great way to focus on a few priorities. This should be collaborative. It should be kind. And it's really got to be looked at and viewed as a tool that we're building together with our athletes. Having coach feedback. So at the end of these meetings, when we go through the PDP, we ask the players, hey, how can we support you better? And it's really important to put what they say in here so that they feel heard, and it gives us a roadmap too, because very often we solicit that advice, but then we don't really take it to heart maybe. So by putting it down in writing, we're able to track ourselves a little bit better. Along those lines, when we're at practice, we have let our players know that we want to look at these during training. It's a great way for us to check in on what someone is focusing on during practice. And then we can also go through and look at their PDPs. Like, they're warming up, they're throwing over the net. I don't need to be doing anything at that point in time. So I can go through, look at what Sally's focusing on for side out today, for example. Meet them where they are. So you can see we want to define any terms or jargon like stats. So you can see in here, we went through and defined how we're tracking these things. as a younger coach, I used to think that like there was some sort of like holy grail of how statistics are tabulated in volleyball, and like make it what you want. There are no rules with stats other than like the math should check out. But um go through and define how you are thinking about it. Going back to this, because very often I think we assume way too much about what our players' understanding is of different terms or stats. So making sure that all questions are answered at that meeting. Let's see. Other key takeaways. Keep it engaging. I'll just take a sentence from a presentation or from the PDP, throw it into Chat GPT, and say, please add emojis, but don't change the text. And it spits out some fun stuff. And I think it just does a good job of making things look more visually appealing. And the younger generations that we're communicating with speak in emojis. So meet them where they are and keep it fun. Here's another question. Are their journal card entries stat form, or do they give their general goals? It's up to the player. They can do it how they want. Like if they want to say, I want to make sure that 8 out of 10 serves today are under the second red on the antenna, and that's my goal. Great. Like if that's how they want to go for it. But we don't give like hardline direction on how they need to formulate their goals. Great question. Any other questions?
Andrew, I have one.
Yeah.
How important is the player's role in this process? How engaged do you get the players in bringing them on board and getting them involved in this? And how important is it that they are involved and engaged in it?
Yeah, really critical. Well, I mean, if they are not engaged in this, it's kind of a worthless document, right? Like, it's good that we have stats of where people, kind of line up in our program, but each player is in charge of their own development at the end of the day. And when you give someone more autonomy and agency with the direction of their development, odds are they're going to be more bought into it. And so having them as a active participant in this process is critical. How do you get them to buy in? I think that kind of depends on the level. So like buy-in in college is going to be different from buy-in in juniors and youth volleyball. Um, at the collegiate level, I think that the greatest source of buy-in is competitiveness. And we have a high concentration of very competitive student athletes. And at the youth and junior level, like it's probably more just focus on fun. And so if there's a way to reward, uh, you know, their improvement and progress, I'm trying to like, the weekly winner for our little cauldron, like it's this little tree pin that we put on the whiteboard folders. And like that's kind of a combination of like fun and competitiveness. But I think it's very driven by the level that you are at. I will say hi to Emma Morris for you. Thank you, Matt. During timeouts, do you allow players opportunities to rally together or always have coaches speak up? That's a great question. So beach volleyball and indoor volleyball are very different on the timeout front. I think that you got to meet players where they are. One of the ways that we can do that, we can present, the challenge that we're facing. Hey, they're setting to this zone. The attacker is mostly doing this. How do you guys want to shut that down? And whether the players just come up with all their ideas on their defensive strategy, or you say, we can run this play, or this play. What do you guys want to do? Giving them a little more control. And then there are times like when you're coaching and you're like, this is the plan. I really think we should do this. I'm not always right, but I feel really good about this one. You can go a couple different directions on it. Okay, another question. How do you divide up which coaches evaluate which players? And what were the questions in that Google form again? What do you do when you guys don't agree on priorities? So first question, one, we just generally like divvy it up. Like I take 8, Joe takes 8, Billy takes 8, and try and keep it organized with who's doing who. The questions in that Google form, they're in that link. If you scroll up and go to the if you go to that example PDP, it's somewhere in here. Yeah, the PDP example link. If you click on that, then down here, presentation, these are all the presentation slides. And if you just zoom in, you can see all the Google form questions that we put in there. There's no right or wrong way to do this, guys. Like have whatever inputs you want into this. And then the last question there was, what do you do when we don't agree on priorities? I think just as a coaching staff, we talk so much and spend so much time speaking about this stuff that I think our alignment is pretty high. And then if we aren't aligned, then try and look at the statistics and see if there's something where, like Joe was saying, can the stats cut through someone's bias? And it's not about who's right, it's about what's right. And if Joe's hot take on someone is the best idea, we're going with Joe's idea. Great questions. Okay. Next question, hot take question, but has any player used these stats to argue your decision making as a coaching staff? Feel free to ignore this if it's too controversial. Good question. Joe, Billy, has anyone used the stats to like argue something?
No, but one thing that we do consider when we explain to them that stats aren't the whole story, for beach volleyball, what's really unique is that our pairs play at different flights. And so we have to consider that as well with the benchmarks, because some player might be killing it in their numbers, but they're also playing against weaker competition. So that's also factored into numbers. So for instance, somebody playing at the ones might have fewer digs because the balls hit harder, they're playing against better competition. And so we kind of also, on the positive side, kind of spin that to them as well.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had anyone come in really hot with a big argument, but I've definitely had questions about, I think my numbers are good here. Why isn't this translating to who I get to play against at practice? I got that question last year, actually. And so that's when the conversation comes up of stats tell part of the story, not the whole story. And then just kind of moving the focus, like acknowledging, yes, your numbers are very good in this area. That's really awesome for you. But now let's move on to the areas that you do need to improve in, because if you want to get to the next level, this part also needs to come up as well. So kind of acknowledgement. Yes, you're doing great in that area. That's awesome. Now let's be a little realistic about your whole game as opposed to this one stat, and knowing that this statistics don't perfectly translate to winning.
Yeah, and adding to what Joe and Billy said, having the benchmarks, those are really important, because if you only view your numbers in isolation from the team, it's really easy to make the argument, well, my side out numbers are going up. But then you see, well, this is in relation to the whole team. And it's very common for athletes to forget that while they are improving, so should everyone else, and likely everyone is improving at a similar rate. And so just really trying to steer the narrative of like, you existed in the larger group, and like we're all trying to improve, and a rising tide, raises all ships. Speaking of which, we just got a question. Is there something you do similar like this for your coaching staff? Oh, I wouldn't say we get into granular detail like this for the coaching staff. Like I'm not like going back and watching video of Joe and like counting her paces on side switches and like timing her on that. But we definitely periodically throughout the year go through like, hey, what are you trying to get better at? And I would say it's less formal for us, which Joel, I appreciate the question because we could probably do better on that.
It's all about reflection on all levels. I have a different side I'd like to take with this a little bit. Can you go back to your slide on the whiteboard that you have at practice? I know your practice plan was etched out, but this kind of brings up an interesting thing that has come out. And, Andrew, of course, and the staff work with the NTDP programs that we have, and whiteboards are extremely important. We also do this at the national team level and every level throughout USA Volleyball. Talk to me a little bit about how, specifically with the whiteboards, and not only that, but they also, of course, have their files that are right there, and how important that photo right there is, and having that and having the ability to support that and produce that at every practice is throughout a player's lifetime. And how do you bring them on board, and how do you teach them to read it? So talk to me a little bit about the whiteboard.
Yeah, I'd say that in terms of what we're writing on the whiteboard, it's like the bare minimum for a player to know the flow of practice, what the focus is, what the general rotation is. I think in general, I'm a less is more kind of coach. And so are we getting into like minute by minute timing and exact available number of points? Like, no, definitely not. Like, I don't want to overwhelm our athletes. And we look at it and then we always go demo what we're going to do, because as anyone who's played can attest, like hearing the structure of a drill does not suffice. Like you got to go experience it. And every time we demo, I really think that the more mistakes that happen in a demonstration, the better, because then you're just working out all the kinks that are naturally going to happen anyway. So really trying to celebrate that. And just making demos fun. Like you don't want people all edgy, like, oh, don't screw up the demo. It should be fun and set the tone for a fun game that you're gonna do.
I love
But
that.
having a whiteboard is huge. We're lucky to have this like 7-foot monster out there. But just like have fun with it. It doesn't need to be so rigid. Like make silly drawings, get the players involved, have players explain games. Like very often we'll during a time I'll be like, hey, Ashley, you're gonna explain the next game. And then they make it way more fun than we possibly could.
So keep the questions coming down below, and we'll continue this conversation. But how important and I'm going to start with Joe, how important would it have been for you to have a player development plan like we're talking about here as a youth athlete and as a college athlete coming through and playing? How important would it have been for you?
I think it would have been extremely helpful. I definitely did not have anything like this from any of my coaches growing up. I definitely felt like I could go talk to them about what I wanted to get better at. But the way we do it with our players here is so much more organized and easy to follow. I'm thinking about my life as a teenager in high school was so busy, and I'm sure your guys' athletes are the same. They're going to school and indoor practice, beach practice, and they have homework and all these things, and it's a lot to keep track of as a young player. And the ones who are extremely motivated on their own and want to put all their focus into volleyball will, but you probably have a lot of players on your team who are like, they want to be good, but they don't know how and where to put their focuses to get better in the most efficient manner possible. That was probably me in high school. And it felt like I was going to practice and just playing and doing whatever the drill is. But I do think that our players on the Stanford team, because of these PDPs, have a much more detailed and kind of linear plan for how they want to go about their training. And I do think if I had something like this, I would have improved at a quicker rate. And I think our players know how to improve much better than I did when I was a player. And it's a skill to be learned, but having this guide that you can look at every day before practice is just insanely helpful to them.
Billy, how about you? Or Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to get to Billy too, but to touch on what Joe was saying, like there are some players out there who like they bring a journal everywhere and they write it down and they're like super on it. And I've very incorrectly made the assumption that players are better at that than they are. And so I used to just kind of have this like laissez-faire attitude of, hey, bring your journals, keep it in your backpack, write meaningful stuff after matches. And it doesn't happen with like 95% of athletes. And so we were like, screw this. Like it's on the whiteboard. You guys are grabbing it, you're looking at it like, look, write as little or as much as you want, but like we're gonna provide an opportunity for you to do this. And
Okay.
and we're gonna be systematic about it. And it's not gonna be like rigid and like it's gotta be fun and it's gotta be engaging and it can't feel like a chore. And so you gotta find that sweet spot for your level of play. Um, but yeah, I think just don't assume that your players are like going home and like writing in their journal at night about how volleyball. Like as soon as they leave you, they are on to the next thing in their life, and they have forgotten everything that you've just gone through as a group. Yeah, Billy, go ahead, and then I want to answer these questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we hear the most, or the thing we hear the most, is I want more feedback. I want more feedback in practice. I want you guys to talk to me more. And this is a really good way to give them not just like to be talking, but like, hey, this is like really thought out, statistically driven feedback. And so we can point to this as a way. This is, we're putting a lot of work into this. I also think that, especially if you have players on the lower end of playing time, their packet is just as long as everybody else's. And so they can see, like, if I wasn't a starter, I could still see that my coach cares about my development and they're putting just as much thought into that. Even if maybe late in the season, they're not getting as much feedback in practice, that you still care about their development.
It's also so much better feedback than you can give off the cuff in practice. Like, yeah, obviously you want to be talking to your players in practice, but sometimes weird plays happen. Sometimes like they're not having a good passing night, but they're normally a very good passer. If you just give like little tidbits every time you see a random play in practice, it can feel to the player like they're getting a lot of feedback, but what do they actually take away from all those little things that you said throughout practice? Are they going to remember them all after practice? Are they even going to apply to their game the next day when maybe they were passing really badly that day because they slept for 3 hours the night before, and the next day they're a whole different player and everything's different? So having this packet with them at practice shows data-driven feedback that has been compiled over a long course of time, many matches played, and is going to be much more relevant to their kind of average game than any given night of practice.
Yeah. I want to go through these questions. How often are you updating the PDP? I mean, the stats are being tabulated over the course of a whole training block, but we are delivering this and consolidating it twice a year, at the end of our fall training block and at the end of our season, which is in the spring. So that's the answer to that. And then how do you encourage a player when they're on a loop and they don't fulfill their objectives? Like meeting objectives and goals and chasing those things in sports, it's really hard. And we it can be very challenging for athletes to understand the difference between school and sports. Like generally speaking, the level of effort you put in school more or less equates to the grade you get. It's kind of X in, X out. For sports, you can be putting in max effort and still be like the lowest side out percentage on the team. And so just letting them know like your value as a human being is much greater than what your passing percentage is. Like it really comes back to valuing the person over the performance. And so one, like recognizing that it's hard. Two, valuing the person over the performance. And one of the ways that you can do that is by depersonalizing it. Instead of saying, you side out at 50%, you can say your side out numbers are at 50%. There's a subtle distinction that I'm trying to like continually get better at. Like the serve is too flat or like too loopy to be effective instead of like your serving is crappy. There's a difference between talking about like the skill and versus talking about the person. Hopefully that's helpful. Club team rosters change from season to season. What would be your high points for a single season PDP? I think probably like the big marks to hit for like a single season would be coach assessment, player assessment, non-cognitive skill goals, leadership workshop, teammate appreciation. Stats, like probably throw it in there and be like, maybe they're graduating to the next, they're moving from U16 to U17. And if you run a club or you operate in a club, you can get your whole club on board with this, and then you're operating within the same framework. And maybe the inputs are a little bit different, but at least they have something that they can like carry on and hand to their next coach. Very often as a club coach, you just get this new crop of athletes and you have no idea what they've been working on. And the more often that we can not make assumptions about what they've been working on or what their goals are, the better off their relationship's going to be.
I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think you did. Just tying it into the PDP, like what's really cool is we want to individualize practice. So, and I think that keeps it fresh. So instead of having all 24 players work on the exact same thing, we, for instance, a game like we do a game called Bingo, where they get an individual bingo card with like the stuff they're trying to cross off. I think stuff like that, when they know it's personalized and individualized, even if you're running the same drill, maybe that day their focus is different based on their PDP. So that's a way to kind of like tie it in and I guess keep it fresh too.
Yeah. So like you can design a game where there are a lot of side out opportunities for every single player, but everyone's working on something different. Some person might be working on like, I'm trying to tool off the block. This person's working on like hitting more cut shots off, kind of off their body line. So like every person can have their own pathway within a practice, and it's not going to look like, they're not going to look like robots out there. And that keeps it fresh.
Another way to keep things fresh is to mix up the way that you score games. So volleyball is always volleyball, but we play a game called ace ball where they're playing normal volleyball, but you only get a point for an ace, and girls are just launching serves. You get a lot of missed serves and there's some laughter around it. It's fun, but they learn that they can serve tougher than they do when they're worried about missing. We play games where like literally you're just playing normal, but you can only score off of a cut shot or a high line, or you can only score off of a dig to transition. So it just puts more emphasis on the skill you want to work on and makes them think about different parts of the game.